Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope everyone is doing really well today. Welcome back to our monthly webinar series. We're back after a short break for the holidays. Thank you so much for coming to today's broadcast. Today, Brian Gleeson and Martin Donnelly from IBM are presenting Building Responsive Applications Using XPages. My name is Courtney. I'm the marketing manager at Team Studio. Howard Greenberg and Paul Della from TLCC are joining me today, and we're your hosts. I'll be taking a few moments right now to cover some housekeeping items. Then I'll pass the presentation to Howard so he can give an intro, and then we'll dive into today's topic. So the housekeeping items. The attendee list is private. All attendees are muted during this session, so you can participate by typing your questions for Brian and Martin inside the questions section on your GoToWebinar window. There's a picture on your screen now to help you find where this is. We're doing Q&A at the end of the session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the questions section. Howard and Paul will put a voice to it once Brian and Martin are finished presenting. This session is being recorded, and the links for the recording and the slides will be sent to you in a follow-up email in a few days. As most of you know, Team Studio provides notes application development tools and services. We celebrated 20 years in business at IBM Connect in Orlando earlier this month. The Notes tools are our suite of tools for Notes developers and admins. They help with tasks such as source code control, performance, and troubleshooting. We recently released Team Studio Usage Auditor, our comprehensive IBM Notes application usage auditing tool. It captures business usage history across your entire IBM Notes environment, identifies user activity by filtering out server replication and agent activity, and audits apps for web browser and Notes client activity. For more info on this tool, just visit the link shown on this slide. Okay, and now I'd like to introduce IBM champion Howard Greenberg from TLCC. Howard's going to give an intro, and then we'll get started with today's presentation. So over to you, Howard. I'm making you the presenter now.
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning and good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Let's see, bear with me for a second as we transfer computer screens. And let's see. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing my computer screen, and myself, Howard Greenberg, and my partner at TLCC, Paul Della. Paul, you want to say hello?
Good day, everyone, and thanks for coming. And yes, we're seeing your screen, Howard.
Thanks, Paul. Okay, so we're going to be your co-host today as we go through this webinar. Before we start, a little bit about TLCC. We have been around almost as long as Team Studio. This will be our 19th year in business as TLCC. And from our beginning of TLCC, we've been doing self-paced courses on Notes and Domino, as well as on XPages since that came out in the beta days. Already it's been quite a few years. And our most popular course is our free demo course. We have an Introduction to XPages course, so if you haven't jumped into the XPages fun and games yet, we have a free demo course that you can sign up at our website and get started. We also, Paul and I, do mentoring, so we can help you as you transfer what you learned in our courses to your applications and work with you one-on-one. As well as we can do private classes either at your site or online. And finally, Paul and I have been spending a lot of time the last year or so developing apps for many of our customers who needed extra hand or don't have the development skills in-house, or just need a little extra help in making the move from Notes apps to web-based XPages apps. And Paul and I are both real interested in what Martin and Brian have to say here, because we've been doing a lot of Bootstrap-enabled applications over the last year. So we're excited to hear what's coming out. Got a couple of great webinars coming up. As many of you know, we do these webinars once a month. So we ended up not doing one in January with all the build up to Connect, but we got some lined up now through April. We're working on some additional webinars for May and June. And then we'll take a break over the summer and start up again in September. But in March, we have John Jardine. He's from South Africa. He did a really nice session on best practices and techniques at Connect that he's going to bring to us. And then in April, Paul Withers and Jesse Gallagher are going to talk about the Domino API. So this is kind of a modern Java API to access your Domino backend objects, as well as there's a number of other nice features that they've added into this Open NTF project. So they're going to kind of do a walkthrough of that project and how to get started. So that should be really exciting too. And as I said, we're working on some good sessions in May and June. I'm just not ready to announce those yet. So as Courtney mentioned, we're going to ask questions. As you go through the session, you'll see there's a questions pane in your GoToWebinars interface. You can ask your questions as we go through the webinar as Brian and Martin are talking. At the end of the webinar, we'll have time for questions, and Paul and I will verbally ask your questions to Brian and Martin. So that'll be at the end, but please ask your questions as they come up so we can queue them up. Okay, so let's get started. Brian Gleeson and Martin Donnelly have been with IBM on the XPages team and Domino Designer team for quite a few years now. And they both have been involved in incorporating the Bootstrap into the extension library project. So let's turn it over. Brian or Martin, I'm not sure who's going first.
Hey, I'll be Brian here. I'll be sharing my screen.
Okay, let me change presenters over to you, Brian.
So Brian, as Brian says, will be sharing on the screen, and I'll kick off the slides at this point. So hopefully you guys can see building responsive XPages applications. This presentation was delivered at Connect by Brian Gleeson and Porrick Edwards. So I'm just stepping in today to give an extra handout because, you know, Connect was sold 2 weeks ago. So we have some little updates from that time. But just before we get started, you should note that a lot of the technology you see here when it comes to Bootstrap, it is delivered via the extension library, and we even have some newer stuff that's in the extension library of the extension library, what we call xlibx. So, you know, given the nature of that, it's not part of the core product as yet. There is a mapping for which things progress from extension library to Notes Domino core. So anything in extension library ultimately does end up there, but for all intents and purposes, what you see today is forward-looking to that extent, and so you have to take that into account when making any business decisions. Okay, so we go to the agenda. Thanks for the brief introduction. We'll introduce ourselves, the technology as well here in a moment. So today it's all about Bootstrap 3, which is what you have now, and Bootstrap 4, what's coming down the pike. And Brian will deliver a lot of demos in that space. It's not a serial agenda. The demos, as you see it laid out here, the demos and the slides kind of are interwoven according as needed. So, but essentially, yes, we'll work through a series of slides and demos on Bootstrap 3 and 4. There'll be a section on tips and tricks, and wrap up and Q&A. So we'll make sure we have time for that. So, as I say, my name is Martin Donnelly. I'm with the XPages and Domino Designer teams here in IBM Ireland. I've worked in the app dev space for Notes Domino for quite a number of years, and I've been active with XPages, obviously, OpenNTF, Bluemix, and with various publications. And I'll take a moment to introduce Brian as well. So Brian is also a key member of the runtime team and has been involved in all of the aforementioned places like Bluemix and OpenNTF. I will say that Brian is very much the subject matter expert in Bootstrap and all things responsive. So all of the heavy lifting here today will be done by Brian, I'm glad to say. So Anything else to add, Brian, or have I given you?
I think you've made a big enough head there.
Okay. So we have one more person to introduce to you, of course, and that's Frank Adams. So we thought it was better, the demo might work better when we tend to pull in Frank as the persona and kind of describe this whole talk in terms of the challenges that Frank as an XPages developer for Greenwell faces. So Frank was a Notes developer. He's gone to XPages. He's built some XPages app, and he's got some experience there, as well as being a blogger and active on Stack Overflow and a consumer of the extension library, which piqued his interest in Bootstrap. So Frank has a One UI 3.0.2 XPages application that he's looking to modernize and make responsive with Bootstrap. So that's a challenge that's facing Frank today, and we'll see how he gets on as he works his way through the finding out about Bootstrap and the various challenges and benefits of going that route.
Martin, I just want to cut in there. It was actually Frank was the persona that I used in my Connect 2015 session, showing that process of going from One UI to Bootstrap. So that was what he achieved last year, and now we'll be showing sort of further steps after Frank has built up sort of 1 year's experience of using Bootstrap in XPages.
So Frank is more advanced than I gave him credit for.
Yeah.
Good man, Frank. Okay. So so we're looking at responsive web design. There's a bunch of things to kind of take in, I suppose, at the overview level, right? I mean, Bootstrap is the world's most popular UI framework. It's very popular with our own XPages community, and kind of started out really as a separate project on OpenNTF that Marcus Sink and Philip Riand started out. It was absorbed into the extension library, and kind of we made some standardized changes to it with the intention of, as I say, introducing it to the Notes Domino core with Notes Domino next. So it's a responsive design framework. It's really kind of a write once, run anywhere promise, insofar as being able to deliver an adaptive user experience per device. So if you want your application to be adaptive across anything from a smartphone to a tablet to a desktop browser, this is probably the most popular solution out there for building applications that can move seamlessly across those environments and give you the best experience in any given one. So it gives you that uniform, modern, clean user experience that people are used to seeing across the domain today. In a space, apart from obviously its own intrinsic CSS resources and its own code, it's on things like jQuery, glyph icons, normalize.css, which we'll go into in a moment. So the first part of this, as I say, is all about Bootstrap 3, which is what we have today, and which delivers a whole treasure trove of richness in and of itself. Bootstrap 4 is coming, but we'll concentrate today on, right now, for the next number of minutes on Bootstrap 3 and what that can do for you. So let's look at a little of the history there. So you can see on your screen, you've got on the left side in purple, hopefully the colors are all represented as they are for me. So Bootstrap is obviously something that XPages extension library absorbs. So that library, like version 3.2, delivered in June 2014. It went through a series of releases right up to November of last year. So November 2015, when 3.3.6 was released. So you can see there's a steady stream of point releases, minor releases and micro releases coming all the way along the line. After the June 2014 release of 3.2, in November of that year, so a number of months later, we took that release and absorbed the project that Philippe and Mark had started into the XPages extension library proper, and based that on 3.2. And then we had subsequent releases, VTP 11, 12, 13, 14, and so forth, to do lots of work in that regard. Right? So we had to obviously not just include the libraries and get all the CO work done there, but there was the upgrading of all of the renderers. the new layout properties that we had to add to the runtime to be able to properly configure the Bootstrap controls, the accessibility work and the simplification of Bootstrap to kind of fit the XPages model as best as possible. There's also, of course, the designer tooling and layouts wizards that we incorporated Bootstrap functionality into as well. So we've had this kind of parallel course where we work very much in tandem, trying to keep delivering XPages value on top of the underlying Bootstrap release. Most recently, as I say, 3.36 was released in November, and in January or February? When was the release? January. So the gap really shortened there between 3.36 release, it's being out there, and it being included in the XPages library. So that was in fact released at Connect. So so V16, which is no more than 2 weeks old, if you move to that now, you'll be getting the 3.36 underlying Bootstrap release. So that's kind of the history of how these things move forward. The value actually of going to V16 here and thus getting 3.3.6 is obvious, I think, from the slide that's up there now, right? You can see that there's over 1,000, or almost 1,000, I should say, issues and pull requests closed between 3.2 and 3.6. And with each of those micro releases, you can see that there's been a significant number in each individual one delivered. So anyway, in and around 1,000 issues and pull requests closed, so that's a lot of value right there. Hundreds of CSS and JavaScript bugs delivered to Carousel, which is a popular control, one that we use in many applications and is embedded in many XPages applications. Has a performance improvement delivered in 3.3, which obviously we directly benefit from. So that's something that we were absorbed and got for free from underneath us. Similarly with accessibility, and XPages itself, as you know, has an accessible path that's done to IBM standards. So the XPages runtime is certified, and we're greatly aided and vetted by having our modernization kind of focal point in Bootstrap, also having a lot of work done in and of itself in its own accessibility code in its CSS and JavaScript. So we do pick up and benefit from a lot of that. Glyph icons, I believe, the layer originally started out with about 200 glyphs in a single font file. There's been 50 added in the 3.32 release, so this gives us the ability to scale to high resolutions without any pixelation, to colorization and scaling and so forth. So a lot of benefits there from the usage of glyph icons. Normalized CSS, which is another open source project. I think out of Nicholas Gallagher is the originator of that particular one. A small CSS file that really kind of handles the incompatibilities and quirks that exist across many of the popular browsers that people try to support today. So that's really at the base, down in the base of Bootstrap, and helps handle all of those nasty issues that otherwise people have to code for themselves, and doesn't make for a pleasant experience. So as we move along, falling rocks, crocodiles, skull and crossbones, all these scary monsters that are popping up in the next thing is by way of warning, although possibly excessively so. So when we move to V16, we have moved to 3.6, as I've said, but really what we're doing here is we've been getting away from the major release. Like, as you can see in previous releases, those of you who've been using it, you can see that there was quite granular sort of references to our underlying technologies in terms of Bootstrap and jQuery. So for a major, when we're working within a major release now, like Bootstrap 3, for example, we won't be kind of referencing the minor or the micro releases within that theme. So where you used to have 3.2 and 3.2 flat, we simply have Bootstrap 3 references going forward. So the resources in our underlying packaging have been restructured to do that, and we give you a helping hand with all of that in terms of. So I guess the warning here was that yes, you could have possibly some application breakage, although we do a lot of work in this release to prevent that from happening. It certainly doesn't happen gratuitously. if you are pointing to a 3.2 theme, an existing application, that will be remapped for you to our new Bootstrap 3 theme. However, you know, if people have references to explicit references to you know, 3.2 version numbers and so forth, from things that they've pulled in themselves as resources into your XPage or into your XPage application, then you may need to touch your application here and there to correct for that. So what would Frank have to do? Well, for an existing application, 3.2 theme and so forth would no longer appear in the application dropdown. So that could push that or repoint that to be a Bootstrap 3 reference. That would be the right thing to do in the XPages properties page. And you can see the underlying markup change that would happen in the XPage as a result of that. However, as I said, the runtime will do the right thing there when it comes to executing the application and you know, seeing any references to obsolete resources and remapping them accordingly. So we're coming up to the Bootstrap 3 demo time. Did you want to actually show at this point?
I'm just going to jump in here and give you just to show that the extension library automatically handles the old theme and points it to the new theme. So I've got an application here called the XPages EXT, and you can see in the XSP properties, I've still got a reference to the old Bootstrap 3.2.0_flat theme. And so if I go over to my browser and hit that application, so I've added this info box on the main page, which tells me that yes, I am using that 3.2.0 flat theme, but it also tells me that I'm using the new 3.3.6 Bootstrap version that's part of Extension Library 16. And you can see the Extension Library version in the top of the application up here. So I'm using the new Bootstrap, I'm using the new Extension Library, I'm referencing the old theme still, but everything's handled automatically and my application still works just fine. That's the case when you've specified your application theme in the XSP properties. If you've created your own custom theme, like I have done in this other application, this is a custom to-do theme in my to-do app, and you can see that this theme extends the old Bootstrap 3.2.0 theme. So if I bring up that application, again, you can see that the application is still working with Extension Library 16, and you can see that the name of the theme is to-do theme. I am, of course, using the new Bootstrap version 3.36, even though I've referenced the old theme name. So those two situations are handled automatically, and everything works just fine. So that's why I think Martin was saying we may have overstated the warning a bit, but there is one use case where you would need to upgrade or update your application to fix that. So I can talk to this slide here. On the left is the old structure of the CSS and JavaScript resources for both Bootstrap and jQuery back in Extension Library 15. So you can see in the folder name it's referencing 3.2.0, and in the jQuery files it's referencing 2.1.1. So in the new version on the right, we removed those granular references to the version number, and for Bootstrap we're just referencing Bootstrap 3, and for jQuery we've removed the version number altogether. So as I say, the extension library is designed to handle most of that automatically, but if you had directly referenced one of the resources in your application, which might have been the case if you were using an application that didn't use Bootstrap, but you did want to use jQuery, then you would have directly referenced the jQuery 2.1.1 JavaScript files. So if you did that in your application theme or on a particular XPage with a code snippet similar to the one at the bottom, then you would need to update that to reference the new location of those resources. So that's just something to be mindful of if you run into an issue when moving up to the latest extension library.
So thanks, Brian. I think, it's a very minor issue, really. I think the major use cases are handled automatically by the runtime. If you do have an explicit reference that you more than likely made yourself in one of your applications, you may need just to touch the app, and you'll be upgraded to the latest and greatest version 3.3.6 and pick up all of the, as we talked about, the thousand or so improvements that have happened along the line there. Bootstrap 3, so to wrap up on that, right, I mean, these a whole slew of resources you can see on your screen there. The documentation for Bootstrap is actually pretty good, I would have to say, and that's the first link available under getbootstrap.com, getting started. There is a list of supported browsers, so the browsers that Bootstrap supports. I think actually it might be hashtag support dash browsers as opposed to hashtag support is the link you want to see, but there's a table of browsers out there that Bootstrap supports. The wall of browser bugs, that really describes bugs or quirks within a particular browser that Bootstrap can't address itself, so that they cause problems in Bootstrap. It's really up to the browser vendor, if you like, to address the issues that are sort of blocking bugs or known issues in the browser themselves that Bootstrap has a dependency on the browser provider to fix. They're documented there. Bootstrap, as you know, is open source, but there is the opportunity, of course, just as with any open source stuff, for folks to add value. So there are purchasable themes out there. I think 3 of them on themes.getbootstrap.com for about $100, where you can get very, sophisticated, swanky themes that for particular usages. So if you want to go and actually investigate those, you see them there. Stack Overflow and the Slack channel are both in use for Bootstrap. So questions can be asked to Stack Overflow, and there's a discussion group on the Slack channel where you can ask us and interact. If you want to get at the code, the Bootstrap GitHub repo is the second last one, and of course there's a blog for that we pay a lot of attention to see what's coming next and make sure that we're in step with Bootstrap plans. And that's available on the root of a lot of those ones. Just get to bootstrap.com. So I think at this point really it's we're on to Bootstrap 4, and Brian, are you going to for people
take over for the future-looking Bootstrap 4? So late in 2015, or I think it was in August, the Bootstrap team announced that they had been working on Bootstrap 4 and that they were making the first pre-release of that, which was an alpha version. Since then, they released a second alpha version with some added improvements. So two alpha releases before the end of 2015. So we saw this on that blog page that was referenced on the last slide, and we decided that we wanted to get in line and get ahead of the curve and start implementing XPages support for Bootstrap 4, right now before it actually gets a full release. So we couldn't add it directly to the core extension library because it's not ready for release, and there's still a lot of work to do for the XPages support of Bootstrap 4. But we do have the xlibx, which is the extended extension library. I like to think of it as the experimental extension library. So this is a project that's separate to the OpenNTF extension library, but is also incorporated into it on OpenNTF. So when you install the extension library from OpenNTF, it will actually install xlibx, but anything that's in xlibx will not be rolled into the next major Domino Notes release. So this is, it's an incubator area for us to work on the Bootstrap 4 support whilst we wait for it to reach its full release. There's a link there to the GitHub repository that we've started for it. And we've rolled in that second alpha build of Bootstrap 4, added all the resources, the plugin infrastructure, and we started working on the theme and the renderers in order to support all that, as well as some CSS fixes specifically for the XPages controls. So with a major version number from Bootstrap 3 to 4, there's quite a major overhaul of the functionality within, and therefore there's a potential for some breaking changes. So Frank has also been keeping an eye on the Bootstrap blog and got quite excited when he saw the news that the alpha versions were coming out, and he's been reading the blog and other blogs about this release and getting quite excited about the new features and capabilities that are being added in Bootstrap 4. So like us, he wants to stay ahead of the curve, and he wants, he's eager to try it out and see what his applications look like using Bootstrap 4. So I'm going to jump over to my browser once more. So this is the old Bootstrap 3.3.6 to-do application that, let's say, Frank is running within his Greenwell organization. So what Frank did was he went to the Bootstrap 4 website, he downloaded the alpha release, and he tried to just inject it himself into the Bootstrap to-do application. So what happened when he did that was he got what looked like a fairly broken application. You can see the navigation bar at the top isn't working anymore. The dashboard tracking how many to-dos you have is not working. The menu on the left doesn't look right. And even if you start to scale the application, things don't work exactly as they're expected either. So just dropping Bootstrap 4 in on top of XPages doesn't work out of the box. But Frank's next step was to go over to the xlibx, download the latest release of that, install it on his server and to Designer, and now his application is looking in much better shape. So this is thanks to the work that we've been doing already in terms of the CSS and the renderers within the xlibx project. And so you can see at the bottom here that we've got the Bootstrap version as 4.0.0 alpha.2, and now the nav bar is working better. The navigator on the left looks right, and the dashboard as well is looking proper too. And again, if I shrink the browser, you can also see that the functionality around that is in better shape than it used to be, but maybe still needs a little bit of tidying up. So that's a big improvement from what you would get out of the box. But that's just to show you basically that's just to allude to the point that I was making a moment ago, that with a big upgrade, you're not guaranteed backwards compatibility, and so there's work to be done when moving from Bootstrap 3 to Bootstrap 4. But the goal of the xlibx and Bootstrap 4 support in XPages is to make that transition smooth as possible. So going from 3 to 4, you won't have any problems, hopefully. So I brought back up the release history slide that we had earlier, and I'm going to overlay the Bootstrap 4 releases. There we go. As you can see, as I said, towards the end of the year, they released those 2 alpha versions, and then very quickly we managed to incorporate alpha.2 into the 15th release of the xlibx project. And then I think it was actually the 2nd of February, we officially released the extension library at Connect, and that incorporated the 3.3.6 upgrade of Bootstrap, and also incorporated this xlibx work, where we moved up to, in fact, to V16 of that plugin with some additional fixes and changes there. So all of that is incorporated into the latest extension library that came out about 2 weeks ago. So Bootstrap 4, or Bootstrap itself, being an open source community project, there are no hard deadlines or release dates ahead of schedule. It's all kind of done on the fly, and could happen at any time. But they have the team behind it have said a few things about what their plan is. So they do want to make a few alpha releases, followed by 2 beta releases, 2 release candidates, and then the final release. So they've already had a few alpha releases, and I think there's a 3rd alpha release that's approaching completion, but again, can't be sure when it might come out. So there's at least 4 or 5 releases left until the final version is complete and ready to be used. So what that means is, Bootstrap 4 is going to remain in the xlibx project for the time being, and with an unknown release date, we can't commit to rolling Bootstrap 4 into Domino Notes next. But Bootstrap 3 is already part of the core extension library, so that will be part of Domino next. And one thing that the Bootstrap team themselves did say was that they will still maintain Bootstrap 3 with bug fixes and documentation. And so our plan is that Bootstrap 3 will be part of Domino next, and then after that we'll at some point roll Bootstrap 4 into the core extension library, and we'll have both supported alongside each other. So both Bootstrap 3 and Bootstrap 4 living in harmony in the extension library, mirroring the support that the Bootstrap team themselves have mentioned there. So what's new in Bootstrap 4? Well, there is a lot. There's over 2,000 commits that have already been added, changing over 25,000 lines of CSS and JavaScript code and documentation. So there's a lot of overhaul going on here and a lot of changes. So what I want to do now is go through a list of those. I've listed the sort of significant changes that you'll come across in Bootstrap 4 compared to 3, and show you a few demos of those changes. So one of the controls or components that got quite a bit of change was the navbar controls. So the set of CSS classes that they use to define this component has been simplified and changed around a bit to make it easier to implement in Bootstrap 4. They've made the navbar fluid by default. Fluid is a kind of concept in Bootstrap where it takes the component takes up most of the width of the application, or sorry, the available space on screen, except for small margins on right and left. So it's fluid by default, so it'll take up nearly 100% of the available width. And they've made it much easier to customize the background and text color of your navbar. By default, you need to specify a color for the text and a color for the background in your navbar from the get-go. On top of that, they've also cleaned up some of the functionality around collapsing a navbar on smaller devices, and also when adding form controls to the navbar. So I have a quick demo of the new navbars in Bootstrap 4. So here you can see I've got five navbars on the page. One is fixed to the top, one is fixed to the bottom, and then I've got 3 floating kind of in the middle. So as you can see, each of them has a name on the left here, and that name is actually the color that's been assigned to this particular navbar. So we've got an inverse color. The faded color is more or less considered the default, and then I've got customized background colors on these 2, and then I've also got a BG primary. So primary is one of the base colors in Bootstrap, which you can use in various places within your Bootstrap applications. So now you can apply it directly to your navbar simply by adding the class BG primary. So if I jump to Designer and have a quick look at some of the code, let me just move this out of the way. So you can see here I've got an XPages navbar control, which is a control that we added to the extension library for Bootstrap 3, and we're now working on to get it to support Bootstrap 4. So this is a navbar control that is fixed to the bottom of my application, and I've specified 2 classes, CSS classes on it. Navbar dark, which tells the navbar to display light text because it's a dark background, and BG primary is that blue color that got applied to that particular navbar. Then similarly, I've got the navbar light and BG faded classes on the navbar that is second on the page. And then for the cadet blue navbar, I've simply marked the style with a background of cadet blue, and that applies to the whole navbar. So very simple to use and very customizable. As you can see, each of the navbars has a search control added to it, and the CSS around that has all been cleaned up as well as part of Bootstrap 4. Okay, so next up, I want to talk about the range of device sizes defined by Bootstrap. So in Bootstrap 3, there were 4 different device sizes, from extra small, small, medium, and large. With the pixel ranges you can see on the left there. In Bootstrap 4, they've actually added a 5th one called extra large, which is actually taking over what used to be the large device size, and they've changed extra small to have a breakpoint of 0 to 543 pixels, and small has been changed to what you see on screen there. So these breakpoints, or these references, the XS, SM, MD, LG, and XL, they get used throughout your Bootstrap applications, most notably in the grid layout of Bootstrap, which is really a core feature of Bootstrap, where you define the widths of your components and your controls using the classes you can see at the bottom there. So that defines how many columns that particular content is going to take up for each device size. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on if you're not really familiar with it, so I'll move on for now though. But it is important to take note of that new size in Bootstrap 4. So one of the other big changes is they've added a new component called the cards component. And this is something that I think was born out of the community, really. There was a third-party project called Boot Cards that was started up that was built on top of Bootstrap 3 to add this kind of cards component, this containable, flexible, and extensible content area within applications. So that became quite popular, online, and even I think was it Paul White and Team Studio were involved in bringing that to the X Controls, an OpenNTF open source project as well. I might have got Mr. White's name wrong there, but my memory is failing me. But yeah, a very popular component, and due to that popularity, they've decided to roll the cards component back into Bootstrap 4 and make it a default component. So as I said, it's flexible and extensible content container. You can customize the headers, the footers, the backgrounds, and you can add images and really build up a set of cards just to your particular liking for your applications. Very, very extensible. You can also group them together in 3 different mechanisms using card groups, card decks, and card columns. So I have a simple demo app to show this. It's called the Expo application. Actually, let's go to the browser first. So it's simply a catalog of products. I've used some images of footballs from the internet for this particular application. And each individual product is housed in an individual card with a header for the product name, an image for an image of the product, then a price, a buy now button, and a description of that particular product. So you can see the application there with a bunch of cards on particular rows and so forth. And in order to implement that, the steps are really just to go to the Bootstrap documentation, which is already quite detailed for Bootstrap 4, even though it's only an alpha release. And there's a whole page of information relating to the new cards component with a number of different code examples in HTML. So this is where I started to learn about how to implement the card component, and I copied some of this HTML into an XPage to give me an idea of how to structure my components. So if I go over to Designer now and bring up the so this is actually the catalog page, which is more or less just a repeat that is repeating across a set of custom controls I've designed, the XC card. So that's pulling in the name value, the price value, the description, and also an attachment from this product view within my Expo application. So the card custom control is laid out like so. At the root is really this div with a style class of card, so that houses the entire individual card. We add a card header using the card header style class and some text. Then we've got a card block, which is housing the product image. Then we've got an unordered list, which is marked as a list group, and that's housing both the price of the card, of the product for that particular card, and is also housing the button for buy now. And then at the very end, we've got another card block, which is holding the description. So, it's very modular, and you can piece together your cards with each of these individual card blocks and components, such as you can see in the code here. And then the end result is what you see in my Expo application here. So that's the cards components. The next change in Bootstrap 4 that is quite interesting is the responsive fonts mechanism that they've added. So in Bootstrap 4, the default font size is 16 pixels, and that is only specified on the HTML root element within the CSS. So with everywhere else in the Bootstrap 4 CSS, they're in fact using these rems, which are known as root EMs. So this is a relative size for a font in relation to that root font size. So by default, as I said, it's 16 pixels on the root for the font size. Therefore, if you specify 1.5 rem, you get 24 pixels, 1.5 times 16 pixels. If you specify 2, you'll get 32, and so on and so forth. So what this allows you to do is to actually change the font size across, change the root font size across your entire application depending on the device size being used to access your application. So we use these media queries in CSS and specify one of those breakpoints that I was talking about earlier. So this is the extra small 544, the small 768, and then medium and large. So by specifying different font sizes across a range of media queries, you can change the entire font system of your application depending on the device size. So I have a simple demo of that too. So in this application, actually I might just look at the code first. So I've got this CSS file here which has my media queries defined. First up, we define the font size for the extra small screen at 24 pixels. Then we're going to scale it down for the small screen to 21, scale it down further for medium to 18, and so on and so forth. And as I say, that doesn't specify one single font size for every piece of font on your application. It just specifies the root font size, and then all of your other fonts can be relative to that. So 2 or 3 times bigger, or smaller, however you want to define it. So if I bring up my application again, you can see that at the extra large screen size, we've got quite small fonts. As you can see, the text or the font on the data view here is actually different to the font on the dashboard view and the font size on the to-do app home text at the top. So they're all using relative fonts determined by the, I need to go back. Yeah, they're all using relative fonts determined by that root HTML font size. So if I start resizing my screen, jumping way down to the extra small screen size, now all of my fonts have been scaled up thanks to those media queries. And if I start moving through up to a small device, you can see that the font sizes have all been changed once more. And if I keep going up to medium, the font sizes are getting smaller. Then up to, and I think I've hit the extra large size there. So that allows you to dynamically and responsively control the font sizes across your application just by changing one font size on the HTML element. So there's another change in the area of fonts is the fact that glyph icons have been dropped from Bootstrap 4. So glyph icons were part of Bootstrap 3. They're not actually a fully open source resource, or at least the font file version of glyph icons is not. The font file version is known as the halflings, and this is the halflings were what was rolled into Bootstrap 3. So it wasn't open source, but the glyph icon team made a dispensation that it could be included as part of Bootstrap 3 under Bootstrap 3's MIT open source license. So that meant that we could use glyph icons in Bootstrap 3 in the extension library, and we used it extensively around the XPages controls. So there's an example on screen there of the data view, which is using no less than 4 or 5 glyph icons within that control. So it's heavily used within XPages, and the fact that it was being dropped from Bootstrap 4 was, presented quite a problem for us, because we would have to do a bit of work to replace it, or to, bring in a new open source icon font. But what we did instead was we decided that Bootstrap 3 would come to the rescue. So since glyph icons were still part of Bootstrap 3 and under the same MIT license there, and due to the fact that we said that we would continue to support Bootstrap 3 going forward in Domino Next and beyond, we decided that we would keep using glyph icons within Bootstrap 4. We would just pull the glyph icons from the Bootstrap 3 plugin into the Bootstrap 4. So we'll be able to continue using those going forward. which has saved us a lot of trouble. In the long run, we may need to replace glyph icons at some point in the future, but for now, we'll be continuing to use them. So we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So some other changes to be aware of in Bootstrap 4. The pagers have been changed around somewhat. In Bootstrap 3, defining your pagers was quite simple. You would just put the pagination class on your UL element in your HTML, and it would handle all of that magically for you and develop a nice pager in Bootstrap style. In Bootstrap 4, they've decided to make it a bit more explicit, so you need to define more classes on each of the individual elements within your pager. So the pagination class on the UL, then page item class on the list element, and then the page link class on the anchor within that list element. So you have a little bit more work to do in terms of adding these extra classes to your HTML or to your XPage application. But what it means is that in Bootstrap 4, they were able to clean up a lot of their underlying CSS, which made things much better in terms of consistency across browsers, and it made things simpler for them to implement within their CSS. But it also means that it's easier for end users to override or extend the pager stylings to customize them just the way they want them. So a little bit more work to do in adding a few extra classes, but in the end you can have more control over the look and feel of your pagers in your applications. So on top of that, they've also added a new simple pager, which kind of mirrors the old Bootstrap 3 version in that you just add one class to the UL element. But this is really designed purely for simple navigation pagers where you're adding previous page, next page, or older posts and newer posts, those kind of simple use cases within your applications. So you can very quickly just kind of drop that pager in to your app. So I've got a list of other smaller changes here. The first of which is in the area of buttons. They've added a new set of buttons defined by the button outline class, which you can add to your applications, and each one allows you to. So each button actually comes with a button dash color, which would be button dash primary, button dash secondary, button dash success, and then also each of those comes with an outline version, so which you can see on the screen here. So that's a small addition, but can be a nice one to add to your application. One of the changes, the next one. So they used to have these classes, CSS classes, known as pull left and pull right. What those would do was, as the name suggests, it would pull content to the left or to the right. So if you added that class to a div, say, then it would float it used the CSS property called float to float your content to the left or to the right, as depending on which one you used. But in Bootstrap 4, they've enhanced those somewhat to make them a bit more responsive. So instead of pull left and pull right, you have to define one of the device sizes in the middle. So if I go through the examples here, pull XS right, that will pull your content to the right on extra small devices and higher. So extra small and higher covers all of the device sizes, therefore you pull your content to the right in every case. In the second example, pull SM left, that would pull content to the left for small devices and higher, leaving extra small devices untouched, so they would not be pulled to the left, and so on. So that's a small tweak that they've made to these classes, so if you were using the pull left and pull right classes in your old applications, they would not work in the newer Bootstrap 4 version, but it gives you more responsive control of your application and makes things much better, I think. So the next thing to mention is that the hidden utility classes have also been changed around a bit, again, to make them easier to make responsive. So it used to be the fact that you would just use hidden SM, hidden MD, hidden LG. You would specify the device size and it would be hidden on that device size. But what people would find is that they would have to hide their content across 2 or 3 device sizes, so they'd have three classes added to their HTML, hidden SM, hidden MD, hidden LG, to hide the content across all those devices. So instead of that, they've now provided these new versions where you can hide down or hide up. So hidden SM down hides the content on a small device or lower, hidden MD up on a medium device or higher. So giving you more granular control of hiding content within your application. And then the last one I want to mention on this slide is the margin and padding utility classes. So these, I think anybody who's worked with Bootstrap or with any sort of HTML application will find that they are always adding and tweaking and fiddling around with the margin and padding within their applications. So the Bootstrap team decided to try and make this easier and quicker to add into your applications by adding these utilities. So it's very simple. You first specify M or P for margin or padding, add a dash, then you pick the sides that you want to apply the margin or padding to, and then another dash followed by the size. So if I go through the examples again, MT0 is a margin applied to the top of 0, so no margin on the top. And the sides that you can pick are T for top, B for bottom, L for left, or for right, X for left and right, as in the x-axis, and Y for top and bottom, as in the y-axis. So you can specify that margin across any of the particular size that you need, and then you can specify a different size of 1, 2, 3, 4, or auto to give that margin to your content. And those numbers are, I think they're EMs, so 1 EM, 2 EM, 3 EM, and so forth. And similarly, you have the same kind of concept there with your padding utility classes as well. So a lot of stuff there to try and make your life easier and to make your applications more responsive than they might have been in Bootstrap 3. So some other smaller changes. The tables have had some additional CSS classes added to them. So the first one, table inverse, gives your table a dark style with lighter text, which you can see in the first table in the middle of the slide there. And then the table on the right-hand side is actually using the other three. So it's using a table head inverse, which gives the header of the table an inverse look and feel. It's using table SM to make the table smaller, so less padding and less margins. And then table reflow is actually transposing the matrix of the table. So what that means is it's turning the columns into rows and the rows into columns. So if you compare those two tables that you can see on screen, they're actually the exact same table in terms of rows and cells as defined in the HTML. The only differences are the CSS classes defined on the top of the table, on the root element. And so you can see that the first name, last name, username column is now the first name, last name, username. Sorry, the first name, last name, username row is now the first name, last name, username column in the table on the right. So some extra utilities there for tables. One other thing to make note of is the image responsive class that was part of Bootstrap 3 has been renamed to image fluid, and so that's something to be aware of in case you were using that. And then one other thing that they've added is these new custom forms, which are completely optional, but they give a nice Bootstrap look and feel to elements like the checkboxes, the radio buttons, and the drop-down, the combo boxes, and the file uploads, and so forth. So this was a side project of one of the co-creators of Bootstrap. It was called the WTF forms, and they decided to roll those in as an optional element in Bootstrap 4. So you can make use of those in your Bootstrap 4 applications. And then one other thing to mention is that this footprint, the file size of all of the Bootstrap 4 resources is now that bit smaller, 30% smaller, which is always a benefit when using these applications on smaller devices and on large devices even as well. Okay, so as I said earlier, we've added all of the Bootstrap 4 stuff to XlibX, and we've got this new plugin, as you can see there, that long name there, which is up to version 16 in the latest release. This provides a new theme. As you can see in the drop-down on the left, the Bootstrap 4 theme is now available to be used once you have that plugin installed to your server and to Designer. And then on the right, you can see the folder structure of all of the Bootstrap 4 resources that are now part of that plugin. So what have we done so far? Well, we've got the basic foundation of the plugin infrastructure. We've got that new theme, and we've got all of those Bootstrap 4 alpha resources in there. We've also got in some specific CSS and JavaScript resources that we need for the XPages controls. And then on top of that, we've also got a few renderers that we started working on for Bootstrap 4, namely the navbar, the application layout, the pager, dashboard, navigator, and data view. And most of those controls are being used in that demo to-do application that I showed earlier, which is why it's looking in good shape now. But there's a lot left to do. That's about, what, 5 or 6 controls there that have a renderer implemented, but in the XPages core and extension library, there are, I think, over 120 different controls that we will need to support for Bootstrap 4. So all of those need to be tested and played around with using Bootstrap 4 to find out where the missing pieces are and what doesn't look right or what needs work. And so we've started to track some of those issues on the xlibx GitHub repository at that link there. So you can see what is in the pipeline, and we're going to keep filling that up with more issues as we come across them. And we'd encourage you to try out Bootstrap 4 and give it a go, and whenever you find any issues, you can report them there as well. So let's bring Frank back into the picture. How does Frank get this new Bootstrap 4 alpha work for XPages? Well, he can download the latest release. He can download the latest release from the extension library X OpenNTF page, or he can get it from GitHub. There's a zip file there which provides the update site, which you can use to install to your server and to Designer. Or, as I mentioned earlier, you can simply install the latest extension library version 16. xlibx is packaged in there when you install it from OpenNTF, and you can start to play around with it. So one of the things that we want to really encourage with Bootstrap 4 is, this xlibx incubator area is prime for contributions from the community. It's something that we've been pushing with the open source work of the extension library, and we've taken in a number of different community contributions to the core extension library over the last year or 18 months or so. So we want to encourage the same thing in xlibx. This is a very early stages piece of work, so you can get in from the ground and start helping to build up the XPages support for Bootstrap 4 going forward. So you would go to the GitHub repository, you'd make a fork, you would clone that locally, you can then start writing some code, test it out hopefully a bit to make sure that it's good code, and then you can submit a pull request back to the GitHub repository. We would then take that pull request, review it ourselves, and do our own testing to make sure that it's good code, and then with any luck, we'd roll your code into the xlibx project, and then you would be part of the team, as it were, part of the XPages team, contributing to the Bootstrap 4 support. So what I'm actually going to do here is show very quickly what that process might entail. So here we have the OpenNTF XPages xlibx GitHub repository, and you can create your fork here, and then from there you can clone a local repository to start working on the code. So I've done all that already. I've got my own fork, the Brian Gleeson fork, but let's imagine that it's the Frank Adams fork, and I've got that code running locally in my Eclipse workspace, which you can see the Bootstrap 4 project here on the left. So Frank has been playing around with this. Let's see, go over here. And he's noticed that, so this is the old 336 application, and you can see that the search bar here is on the right-hand side of the top navbar. But if he goes over to his Bootstrap 4 version of that application, the search box is in the wrong place. So he's wondering why that is. And if you look at the underlying code, you can see, might be hard to see on screen, but that particular search box is using the old pull right CSS class, which I was talking about a few minutes ago. So that needs to be updated in order to work properly, because that pull right class is no longer supported. So Frank, being the well-versed Bootstrap and XPages developer he finds the relevant code, in the simple responsive layout renderer, which is part of the Bootstrap 4 project, and he finds the reference to pull right in that renderer. So he knows from reading the Bootstrap documentation that all he needs to do is to update those two references to pull excess right, and that will pull content to the right on extra small devices and higher. So I'm going to restart my HTTP tab, but whilst it's doing that, I'm going to jump over to the command line. So I've moved into my XPages XlibX local repository here, and you can see in the green text there that I've got it's a branch, a Git branch for working on Frank's fix. So if I do git status, it tells me that I have a modified file within my working directory. So I'm going to add that to my commit. So I'm going to commit that to Git Frank's pull right fix. So that is now committed and ready to be pushed to GitHub. You can see that I have nothing to commit. The working directory is clean. So now I'm going to do git push origin, and now the name of the branch, git push origin fix Frank pull fix, and I'm going to enter my credentials. So, oh, I entered the wrong password. Okay, so hopefully that's the right password, and I've now pushed my change, Frank's change, up to XlibX GitHub repository. So if I open up that page again, you can see here that it's telling me that a change was pushed, and I can compare and create a new pull request. So that's kind of the quick outline of how you would go about, making a change to the Bootstrap 4 support and pushing it up to XlibX. I can create the pull request, then the XPages team would take that pull request, review it, and if it passes all of the checks, would be merged into the XlibX code stream. Okay, so Frank is now a contributor. So the overview of that process, you've got the XlibX repo on the left, and then you've got any number of community repositories created via forks on the right, including Frank's repository. And this is actually quite a simple process compared to the core extension library. It's easier to get your code into the XlibX. So when you make your submissions via pull requests, we review those and add them directly into the GitHub repository, and away we go. It's a bit more complex. We have to blue wash the code if we're adding it to the extension library. And that would come later, in fact, because whilst we're working on XlibX, that's fine. We can have the quick turnaround on code changes there. But when we're ready to merge Bootstrap 4 and all of the associated support there into the main extension library, we would do a blue wash process at that time. And then once all of that does become part of the core extension library at some point in the future, it would be ready to be added to the next product stream. So the last section here, I think, is some of Frank's tips and tricks that he's learned over the last year or so from working with Bootstrap in XPages. So I talked a little bit about the grid system earlier on, and it's really one of the core pieces, the core elements of Bootstrap that you need to get to grips with in order to build good responsive applications. So at the top you have your containers, which contain any number of rows, and then the rows contain a certain number of columns. They in fact contain 12 columns per row, and then what you need to do is define the width that your pieces of content are going to use within each of those rows. So I've got some examples there of the column width CSS classes. So from left to right, call XS12. That specifies a piece of content to use all 12 columns of a row on an extra small device. Call SM6 uses 6 columns for a small device, then 4 columns for a medium device, 3 columns for a large device, and 2 columns for an extra large device. So by using these different column widths for your content, you can specify different sizes for your content depending on the device size available. So on an extra small device, you have a lot less screen real estate to use, therefore you need to use up more of it for your content, hence using stuff like col XS12. And it really becomes quite powerful when you built in stuff like the offsets at the bottom there, or nesting rows within each other, and you can really get good granular control over the layout and content of your application. So I have another simple demo of this. So we're going to use the Expo application again, which is showing all of my footballs. And on a large device like my laptop, we can see that there's 4 footballs per row being displayed. But if I start to size this down to a medium device size, which is down here, we have moved to using just 3 cards per row to use up that space. And then if I get even smaller, it's using up one card per row and automatically stacking those vertically. So to do that was really quite simple, in fact. In the card custom control, I have a div at the root that contains each individual card, and we've specified the width that the card is going to use for each device size. So for extra large and large, we're using 3 columns, which allows for 4 per row, because there's 12 columns available. For medium devices, we're using 4 columns, and then for small and extra small devices, we're using the full 12. And that, simply by adding that one line of code, we get that responsive behavior across our application, across the different device sizes. So yeah, a very powerful mechanism to be used from Bootstrap. And as I said earlier, the Bootstrap 4 has added that kind of extra layer and that extra device size that you can use. And this slide is talking about the usage of media queries. So those device sizes come into play again, because you can define your own media queries in your own CSS to add responsive behaviors to your application. So media queries are used throughout the Bootstrap CSS itself in order to make stuff responsive, but you can build on top of that using your own media queries. So I've got another example of that, which I can bring up here. Oh, I've closed it. It is, which application? Actually, I'll bring it up in the browser. So it's the Bootstrap 4 application, which is up the top. There we go, media queries. Oh, it's formatted all of my media queries. Okay, well, the important thing to note here is that I've got a bunch of custom media queries added to my application. I did have them formatted into a readable shape before, but I've lost that thanks to Designer, I'm afraid. But there's a few different media queries there, and for each device size, I've specified a different background color and a different font family to be used. So if I change the size, you can see now on a small device, 544 pixels to 767, I think I'm using the impact font, and I've changed the background color to orange. If I go down to extra small, it changes again. And then as I go through each of the various different device sizes, I get a customized background and font size. So that's just a simple example of how you would use those media queries to change the look and feel or the layout of your application using some fairly simple CSS. Okay, so next up is a tool that I have to admit I only came across recently myself in the last month or two, called Bootlint. So this is really something that you can use to examine the rendered HTML of your application to verify that you're using Bootstrap correctly and you're not making any mistakes. At the moment, it only supports Bootstrap 3, but I'm certain that Bootstrap 4 support is in the works and coming down the line. I have another quick demo of that. So if I go over to this lint page and hit refresh, so you can see that I've got a pop-up saying that Bootlint has found errors in this document. See the JavaScript console for details. So if I bring up the console, I've got a whole bunch of output here, kind of in yellow, and this is Bootlint telling me that I've got certain things in my Bootstrap application that are not strictly proper Bootstrap implementation. So as I said, we only came across this tool fairly recently, and we haven't really had a chance to run it over our own rendering, so we've got quite a few problems there that we might need to tidy up. But that's a useful tool to make sure that you're on the right path and you're not making any mistakes with Bootstrap. And in order to add that to your applications, they provide a CDN where you can load it directly into your app. You can also just paste HTML into a field on their website. So it's very, very easy to use. You can also use Node.js to run that on a command line. But I think I have an example of it in my application. Dashboard lint is in this guy. So at the top of my application here, or my XPage even, I've got an on-client load event, and all that is doing is loading this JavaScript file that is being hosted on the Bootstrap CDN. So once you've added that to your XPage, it'll run the Bootstrap, or the boot lint verifier, and tell you what's wrong with your app. Okay. So I think that's most of the demos. Yeah, so just to mention that, of course, if you're doing building responsive applications, the browsers have themselves built-in tooling to help with that. So Firefox, you saw me probably using Firebug there, and you can also use a user agent switcher to test the responsive capabilities of your application. Chrome has built-in developer tools, you can see in the screenshot there, and then Safari has its own version of those kind of built-in tools, the web inspector and responsive design mode. So using these browser tools is a vital part really of testing your applications, your responsive applications. One other thing that you could do if you're getting very advanced, if you're frank and you're a bit of perfectionist and there's something in Bootstrap that you want to tweak or customize at the base of Bootstrap, you can build your own custom version of Bootstrap at the website mentioned here. And within that, you can customize a whole different set of variables to really get your own flavor of Bootstrap. So you can see this page has a whole host of different settings that I'm scrolling through, defining the grid system, the container sizes, the nav bar, you can define the colors, and just a whole plethora of different variables that you can customize. And then you can click a button at the bottom to compile and download, and you'll get your own version of Bootstrap. So quite a useful thing, and then you can drop that into your XPages application. And you could also fork the Bootstrap Git repository, and if you're very advanced, build your own one from there by changing some of the content and variables within the Bootstrap code itself. But I think the compile and download version is much simpler to use. So I think I can hand back to Martin, maybe to wrap up.
Sorry, Brent Forrest here. So I think Martin's just stepped out. So do you want to just do the?
Oh, I'll just carry on. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to summarize, actually, I'm going to skip to the next one. So just to summarize kind of what we've seen today, what has Frank learned about Bootstrap? So we've seen that the Bootstrap 3.3.6 upgrade has been added to the latest extension library, and the small warning about the refactoring work around that. And we've seen that it automatically will load the new theme if you were using some of the old themes, but there are some fringe use cases where you may need to make manual changes after upgrading to Bootstrap 3.3.6. We've seen the Bootstrap 4 alpha work, both in terms of the new features and changes going into Bootstrap 4, but also the work that we started in the XlibX incubator project. And as I say there, you saw Frank making a contribution, a small fix to one of the renderers, and delivering that to XlibX via GitHub. So Frank also showed you some of the tips and tricks he's learned over the last year or so, working with Bootstrap and XPages in terms of the grid system, bootlint, and making custom builds and so forth. So quite a lot I think we've covered today. This last slide just has some links to some resources. Last year I created a couple of videos in the XPages Goes Responsive theme, which you can see there. I might need to make a new one soon, given all of this new content and updates that are coming down the line. In each of the extension library releases, the README docs are different every time, and each one will have specific documentation around additions that were made in that release. So if you went back to versions 10, 11, and 12, you'll see detailed documentation about the Bootstrap support that was being added at that time and so forth. So I do recommend that you check out those READMEs every time that you download or upgrade to the latest extension library. I think, yeah, we've also seen that link to the GitHub repository for XlibX, where you can start logging issues or submitting pull requests. I've added a link there to the TLCC website, where you can get general XPages courses and training and so forth. and get access to a replay of this this session if you need to see it again. And there's a new IBM social business user community that's just been started and launched in the last day or two, which you can access there, which is a new kind of social area for everything in the kind of app dev user community. So I think that's it. Thanks for watching, and I think we'll take any questions if they've come up whilst we've been chatting away.
Okay, great. Thanks, Brian and Martin, and to Frank as well. That was a good presentation, and it looks like there's some great stuff coming down the pike. So again, we want to get if you haven't asked a question yet, we do have a number of questions queued up. You can use the questions pane in the GoToWebinar interface and ask the question. And we're going to start on the questions now. I first just want to mention we have some upcoming events that mostly outside the U.S., in Germany and Australia, and Engage, of course, coming up. So I have those up on the screen now. And then for those in the U.S., make your initial plans for MW Lug in Austin. The tentative dates are August 17th to the 19th. They're looking to hopefully wrap that up in the next week or so. And so, Paul, do you have some questions lined up?
Yes, I have one from Mark. And I'm jumping ahead to Mark's question before Howard sees it, because I know everyone wants to know the answer to this one. This is for you, Brian. In Designer, when you were showing us the source, the XSP source, you had those cool little chevrons to show your formatting. How did you get those? I can't find those in the preferences.
Let me think now. If I go to File, Preferences, I presume he's talking about these little chevrons that are showing me my tabs.
Yes.
Designer. I don't know if I remember where it is now.
So that is a default setting. It's not something extra you have in there. We just have to figure out where it is.
It's one of the default settings in the General Editor's Text Areas Editor. I think it's this guy, the Show Whitespace Characters. If I hit Apply, yeah, they disappear. So simple enough.
Now we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, of course.
I can switch over to you, Brian.
I forgot that we switched over.
Yeah, so Brian, you're the presenter now, if you want to share that real quick.
So in the General Editors, Text Editors, there's this checkbox for Show Whitespace Characters. If I hit Apply, I've turned it off, so they all disappear. And if I put it back on, so that tells me everything about my formatting that I need to know. Okay, great.
Awesome.
We learn something new every day. Okay, so let me just switch back to me. Getting back to Bootstrap, I got a question from Greg, and this is actually a question I've seen asked, similar questions from several people. So can you talk about what comes with Domino now in terms of, let's say, 901 Fixpack 5, and what comes in the OpenNTF extension library? In other words, why would people want to use the OpenNTF library versus what comes in Domino with all the Fixpacks?
Yeah, so the Fixpacks really contain only very high severity SPRs, or defects, stuff like security problems and major issues like we encountered one with iOS 8 back last year. So the Fixpacks only contain those very high severity issues. They don't contain any of the responsive Bootstrap stuff at all. The only way to get access to Bootstrap within XPages is to use the OpenNTF extension library. And going forward in Domino Next, as I said, Bootstrap 3 will be rolled into that next release, but it won't be part of any of the Fixpacks for 901. You can only get it from the extension library.
Okay, and also, I guess, in terms of functionality, the relational controls are also one of those set of functionality that's in the OpenNTF only version, right? Yes, correct, yes. So there's the relational stuff and the responsive stuff are the really two kind of
key components that are only part of the extension library at the moment. There are other parts, smaller elements and fixes that go into the extension library that might not be high severity enough to be included in a fix pack, but you pick up those fixes in the extension library. There's actually a lot of them. If you go through the history of those READMEs, they each contain a change log with stuff that's been fixed in that particular release. So there's lots in there.
So Park Edwards there from the XPages team. Just to add to that, Brian, as well, I guess I'd just like to mention that at Connect, Bluemix was kind of hot topic around XPages. So the XPages runtime on Bluemix does have the latest version of the extension library, which would include the Bootstrap plugins. So if you're using the XPages runtime on Bluemix, you do have release 15 at this point, but we'll be keeping up, trying as well as we can to keep up to date in terms of extension library releases, so that you have the latest stuff there in Bluemix.
Yeah, and on a similar point, the extension library contains the designer tooling for working with Bluemix and XPages as well.
Okay, great. So yeah, we have those three areas of functionality plus getting all the fixes is a good reason why you should be using the OpenNTF extension library versus what's just shipped in Domino. Yeah,
and I think we've had 16 releases of the extension library since 901 went gold or was released. So that's very regularly updating and adding fixes and features in between major Domino and Notes releases. So yeah.
Okay. Paul, do you have another question?
I've got two related questions. First from Saba. He'd like to create his own Bootstrap styles. How can I extend Bootstrap 3 theme without requiring the default CSS that comes with Bootstrap 3? And an extension of that from David. How do you actually customize? How do you, go to that Get Bootstrap site, customize, and how do you bring that into your XPages designer and your Domino designer environment?
Okay, so I think both answers kind of have both questions have a similar answer. In the Bootstrap 3 implementation within the extension library, we have those two themes, the Bootstrap 3 and the Bootstrap 3_flat themes. So I think as a starting point, what you would do in your XPage app is create a new theme within that app, then copy and paste all of the content from the Bootstrap 3 theme in the extension library. So you can access that open source file on GitHub or download it, and copy that theme file into your own custom theme. And then what you can do from there is customize all of the resources that are being added in that theme. So in that particular, I'm just going to look at it myself here. Where is it? I know you can't see my screen, but I just want to remind myself what's in there. Yeah, so towards the top of that theme file within the extension library, it references the bootstrap.min.css and the bootstrap theme.min.css. So when you copy that theme code into your own theme, you would just change the references for those two resources to whatever you want to use, or you could remove them and start writing your own custom Bootstrap version. If you do that compile and download via the Bootstrap site, that will give you a new set of CSS files. So add those new CSS files to your XPage application and then reference those CSS files in your custom theme. It might be something that will be worth kind of doing a demo of or a video of to give people the means and the know-how to do that quickly and easily. As I know, it could be a little tricky to wrap your head around. But
Brian, that might be a good idea because some people were asking, like, even where they get the source code for the theme. They're not familiar with the GitHub.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can get it from GitHub, or it's part of all of the sources included in the extension library download as well. But it would be, if you're not familiar with that code repository, you'd be stumbling around trying to find that particular file. So yeah, it could be something worth blogging about or something, a tutorial.
All right, great. And we got a question from Kasaba. He said, in Bootstrap 4, have glyph icons been replaced by Font Awesome icons?
No, there's no, at least the last time I checked, there was no font icon system in Bootstrap 4 at all. So even back as far as Bootstrap 3, when we were bringing that over to the extension library, we were kind of, weighing up our options, and we did look at Font Awesome, and we were hoping to bring that into the extension library as part of the Bootstrap work, but it turned out that one of the licenses they use, I think it's something like the Open Font License, OFL, I think, one of those licenses was not compatible with bringing it into the OpenNTF, open source extension library. So we kind of got blocked there. We couldn't resolve that sort of legal barrier around the licensing, and so we had to steer clear of Font Awesome. So that, as far as I'm aware, still upholds today. So we're not planning to bring Font Awesome into the extension library, and we'll be sticking with glyph icons for the time being. But I do know there's one or two similar icon sets that have a more compatible license, shall we say, with OpenNTF. So in the long run, those could be considered to be brought in as a replacement for glyph icons. But for the time being, glyph icons seems to serve its purpose and has over 250 icons, I think. So it's quite useful. But I know that a lot of people do prefer Font Awesome.
Okay, I have a question from Bob. Does the Dojo data grid work in a Bootstrap environment? And I'm just going to extend this question from Bob and add my own extension of that. And that is, is there additional support, kind of like we see in the data view control, where we've got the use of the glyphicons, and to an extent, it can be made responsive with the multi-column property. So any of that for the Dojo data grid control?
Well, I mean, there's obviously quite a few Dojo controls within the XPages extension library where we kind of extended them, and I think Dojo data grid is one of them. So there is support there to make those Dojo controls at the least look more like Bootstrap. There's a third-party project called Bootstrap, which was a project to make Dojo controls more compatible with Bootstrap, that is incorporated as part of the extension library. So that helps us a lot. But in terms of each individual Dojo control, they are not always going to be responsive. It depends on how much time and effort we've put into making them so in the extension library. So I can't say for sure that the data grid is responsive. It probably does need a bit of work, but at the very least it will work using the Bootstrap theme, and it will look more like a Bootstrap control, but it may not be fully responsive, I'm afraid.
Okay, thanks. And let me kind of extend upon that question a bit, Brian. How do you find out, let's say, what controls have been fully bootstrapped? In other words, things like the data view, obviously you can tell that that's completely, been made into Bootstrap, but like what about some of the other controls like the form table control or the regular view panel control? Is there a list somewhere that kind of defines the level of responsiveness that was added?
I don't think we've ever documented that kind of list of what's been made responsive and what's not been made responsive. I'm actually working on that form table control at the moment. As someone pointed out, I think it was Patrick Quinton raised an issue on the GitHub repository, so I've been looking at that after Connect to clean that up and make it more Bootstrap and more responsive. But no, we don't really have a defined list written down anywhere. It might be something we should do, because I probably have lost track myself of which ones have been done and which ones haven't.
Okay.
But at the very least, the sort of, I think the XPages core controls and, the more, at least, in my head, the more popular and more heavily used extension library controls should be responsive.
So while you were talking, Mark added a comment that would be awesome, a massive help, a list of controls that are responsive. So you have another vote for for that bit there.
No.
Okay, so I think we're starting to run out of time. I'll take one quick little question and then another question about Bootstrap 3 and 4. So, Ben wanted to know, he said the Expo demo, and I assume he means the demo you showed with the
probably the to-do demo.
To-dos and everything, right? Is that available somewhere?
Okay, well, the to-do app is available as part of the extension library download. It's in the zip file, and it's also used as the boilerplate application on Bluemix. So if you created a new app on Bluemix, you could download the NSF from there. They're both the boilerplate version and the one inside the extension library are quite similar for the most part, except that the boilerplate, the Bluemix one, has been tailored specifically for Bluemix. So there's a little bit of extra stuff in there. In terms of the Expo app, that was really, if he was asking about that one in particular, that was really just a quick demo app that I put together in order to show stuff at Connect and obviously at this session. But the to-do app is already available from the extension library.
Okay, thanks. And then I think for our last question, and I think we've actually answered most of the questions, so thinking about using Sebastian said, I'm thinking about using Bootstrap in the next 6 months. Is it better to use version 3 or wait and use version 4 from the extension LibX?
Well, yeah, the only problem there is that you don't know exactly. We don't know. Nobody knows really when exactly Bootstrap 4 is gonna be fully released and fully fledged, and when that support might be fully completed within XPages. I mean, if you were looking at Bootstrap right now, it's pretty simple to switch from an old application to using Bootstrap 3. It's just a matter of changing your theme, and for the most part, your entire application will be reskinned and enhanced to be Bootstrap and responsive. Of course, with every application, there may be some tweaks and CSS changes needed, but you could very quickly have your XPages application using Bootstrap 3. In terms of Bootstrap 4, as I say, it could be any time. It could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be a year before we see that in action and ready to be used in production, let's say. So I'm not really sure. I think I think each individual company and developer would have to kind of weigh up that particular option, given the information that's available right now.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'd like to thank Brian and Martin for presenting today, and Courtney and Paul for co-hosting with me. We appreciate everyone attending. We hope the rest of your day is wonderful. And we will be putting out the recording of this session as well as the slides that will be available in an email to everyone who registered for this webinar. So that will be out in the next few days. Thank you very much, and take care.